is guilty, prosecute him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Will be interesting again to see
watch how that
quite a
goes.
number of stories we are watching and will be watching in the coming days. Let's go to the Daily Nation, and the witness blames Ali Kivuitu for violence. The court told now how presidential election results triggered protests as police blamed over KICC debacle, and also Ruto and Bagbo supporters meet at ICC to protest cases as AU leaders prepare for key talks. So really that will be interesting to see how those talks come up. But the mentioning of these two names at this stage when the trial is going on, we will hear more names coming up, right?
We will hear more names coming up. We will hear a lot around Kivuitu, I believe. We're going to hear a bit about Ali, because remember, the difficulty of the ICC cases is that they're continuing in a vacuum. There's a lot of unfinished conversations in Kenya about 2007 post-election violence. Yesterday, when I had the witness speak about it was spontaneous violence, there's been a big argument. Was this violence planned? Was this violence spontaneous? So, since Kenya has never done anything about 2007 post-election violence, the conversations going on at the ICC are happening when they've never been challenged anywhere else. So the witnesses will say what they believe or what they have believed all along from that time. If a witness believes this was Kivuitu's fault, that's what he's going to say. Or this was Ali's fault. So we are going to hear a lot of those conversations going on. Which party? I mean, when you had the witness spent so much time explaining about the formation of ODM, and so there's a lot of unfinished conversations that are going on around the ICC or within the ICC that we believe.
All right. And to another story on mobile phone users, the phone farms switch off and listed users, that's on page 5. So they are on the spot at this particular hours, all the CEOs, the 4 of them. And we've seen that you can technically, we ran a story the other day, just the day after this happened, to just show how easy it still is to buy a line and make a call, still use it.
And I don't think it's going to stop being that easy to do it, because remember, the telcos have a very simple responsibility that whoever they're offering a service to has a name and ID. They can't call those people and confirm that the names and IDs are legit.
Right.
So it's going to be, I think it's a bit knee-jerk of a reaction from government to try and shift focus and make it look like there's a problem with the telcos.
Yes.
But then also, I think the fact that they were switching off lines now after a decision that was made and we all lined up to get our SIM cards registered. Shows there's always a challenge between decision making and implementing the decision.
Right.
And then what happened, like, is it yesterday, when for like 2 minutes at night, a lot of people's phones, including mine, were disconnected. And when you try to call, you'd be told your number is not registered.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
And then a few minutes later, it was back.
Okay.
And then we had apologies from the service providers. So there's
cleaning house?
I think it was house cleaning, but well,
you never know.
You never know.
All right, let's quickly go to the Star. Our time running out now, but the headline on the Star today: police believe attackers were only 4. Westgate operation was bungled. That's what Uhuru says. But we are yet to see heads rolling, despite him saying that.
Progress. I think this is progress.
Admission.
I think this is progress. The president admitting that Westgate was bungled. A lot of progress. This is him now catching up with the rest of us. We've been watching from outside and saying there's something wrong about how that particular... We might not know exactly what happened, but there's clearly something wrong about how that case was run. There's been the argument about whether KDF should actually have been on site, because for KDF to conduct any operations within the borders, any local domestic parliament needs to pass that. That did not happen. There's this rumors about friendly fire. I mean, there's a lot of things that went wrong. There's the confusion, of course, about the numbers. So Westgate has been confusion in terms of especially information coming out all through.
Right.
For the president to admit that it was bungled, I think is a step forward. Now, what we actually do need to see is then what? So it was bungled. So who was in charge of bungling it? What are we doing about it? Also, I think for Kenyans, the most important thing is how do we make sure it doesn't get bungled ever again?
it does not happen again.
Sorry.
And as we wind up, Ngunjiri, there's something I wanted to touch on very quickly. What we've been seeing playing out a lot on social media. There have been reports in the past week on the same, what's going on between Rachel Shebesh and the Nairobi Senator Mike Mbuvi. What do you make of this situation and just the kind of life it seems to be taking, that the leaders are in this kind of a position? What is this?
I think it's a mess. I think it's completely, it's messy. It's messy, it's embarrassing. A part of me sympathizes a lot with Rachel because you can tell the costs of her being a woman politician. The rules tend to apply differently when you're a woman. So she's getting a lot of heat in this situation, a lot of it being with the fact that she's a woman. But then the reverse of it all is that she's also placed herself in situations that put her in a complication. So it's not the kind of thing you want to discuss on, it's not the kind of conversation you want to have on mainstream media. And I really pray it's going to go away soon.
Okay.
For the sake of Nairobi, for the sake of these leaders, there's going to be a lot of soul searching. There's going to have to be a lot of soul searching that Rachel Shebesh needs to do, that Sonko needs to do. And I guess it's also a challenge to us as voters. It's in another 4 years we're going back into the elections. How do we get ourselves in situations like this?
How? Exactly. Thank you very much, Ngunjiri, for joining us this morning. And I'll ask you, what makes you feel Kenyan? It's our question of the day today. What makes you feel Kenyan? Yes.
I think it's a sense of responsibility, especially as the country goes through stuff like this.
Right.
Westgate goes through the kind of situations that we're dealing with. Sitting down and making a firm decision. I mean, I could choose to feel whatever I want to feel. I choose to feel to think and be Kenyan. Actually, not feel Kenyan. I choose to be Kenyan in the decisions I make every day and make sure that I don't have to agree with you, but my takeoff point is what is in the best interest of the country. All right. For me, that's what makes me feel
That's Kenyan. What makes you feel Kenyan. Thank you for joining us this morning. Ngunjiri wa Mbogo talking to us and taking us through some of the stories we're seeing making headlines in the local dailies today. We want now to cross over to the Bangla kiosk to see what Sleepy and Serengenge are up to just before we embark on our main discussion later on. Remember our question of the day, what makes you feel Kenyan? Today we are all about what is your responsibility, what is your role in ensuring we attain that national unity, that Ukenya, that Kenyanness. Let's cross over to the Bangla kiosk now. So much more in Panari for the breakfast. They're not serving us chapati, which I love, but we have cookies, we'll have croissants later, we'll have sausages, so maybe I'll bring some to the kibanda. But very interesting that you should say that perhaps I haven't had an opportunity to read the book. I will be reading it, Raila Odinga's new book, but to think that the vitendawili is in there, we'll wait to see if he has some. Let's go to a traffic update very quickly. It's now 7 a.m. You're on your favorite show, Morning Express. Traffic along Langata Road getting worse by the minute. This place is turning into a parking lot early mornings. This is courtesy of my 3 route. Their Twitter updates, very amazing updates on situation around the roads around the country. Or rather around Nairobi mostly. So that's how Langata is looking right now. 5 lanes on Thika Road. There's even a tweet pic here. Things not looking so good there. And then early days school bus driven madly along Embakasi Road from Nyayo Estate, seen at Coca-Cola bottlers rushing and overtaking. Unfortunate that we keep seeing a lot of this post every so often, that buses ferrying kids to school being driven recklessly. So you might want to, as a school, as a parent, just ensure those transporting your children are being careful and practicing safe driving on the road. And then Langata Road again has taken the crown of the most, quote, terriblest road. That's courtesy of Atkisa Jesse, who's saying that. Let's see where else. Jump starts at Karen Shops, that's on Ngong Road. And Riara, Kingara, Mbazi Avenue, Korosho, Agwing Skodek Valley Road route now in the CBD just took 20 minutes. That was a quick one about 10 minutes ago for somebody there. Mombasa Road moving along very slowly towards town, but at least there's some movement. Kiambu Road is clear, very clear in fact, is that update. And one more, let's see, where? On Health Selassie going into town, quite a number of cars. Okay, this has stopped halfway, but quite a number of traffic in most of the routes, but mostly also we are seeing a lot of vehicles just moving on right along. An accident between a truck and a matatu headed to CBD directly opposite Total petrol station near City Cabanas, traffic building up. All right, let's remind you our question of the day before we take a quick break. Today we are asking you, what makes you feel Kenyan? Remember, it's Thursday, and every Thursday we are all about conversations around our nationhood. I love these particular shows on Thursday because it's really, as Kenya celebrates 50 years since she attained her independence, we are counting down to the culmination of the celebrations on 12th of December later on this year. But important that we have these discussions to ensure that as a country, we are responsible for our destiny. We are the ones to shape it. So what makes you feel Kenyan? Also, what do you feel is your role in ensuring we remain a country united? We have that Kenyanness, brotherly and sisterly love, despite our diversity, despite our differences, despite our challenges as a country. And we have many, but still we must maintain that oneness. Let us know what your thoughts are. 22155, our SMS number. At KTN Kenya, at Sophia Wanuna is where you can tweet us. Remember the hashtag Morning Express KTN. We take a of October 2013. It is 7:08 a.m. We're glad you're watching indeed. Remember, Thursday, we're all about conversations around and about our nationhood. Kenya marks 50 years this year. We're happy and excited about that. It's no mean task for any country. Still a young democracy, but growing steadily. And this morning, we're all about what our role is. What is your role? What is my role? Each of us, because we do have a role. So want to explore that, want to break it down and get an understanding of what each of us can do. And our question of the day, we're asking you, what makes you feel Kenyan? Because it is when you feel part of, then you can engage and want to find out what then you can do to make the country better. So what makes you feel Kenyan? What makes you proud to be Kenyan? And even what is your role? Engage with us on all those questions, because we'd like to know what your thoughts are. At KTN Kenya is our Twitter handle. You can reach me directly at Sophia Wanuna. Remember to use the hashtag Morning Express KTN. Let me now introduce you to my panel this morning. Gojiri Wambogo is still with us, so we're glad you stayed on.
Thank you.
Convener of Kenya. Also with us this morning, Karen Wakoli. She's Youth Leadership Consultant, right? And Mark Otani, Radio News Editor at RMS. Thank you all for being with us this morning. We appreciate you taking the time to come and have this very important conversation. And I'll start with, why is it even important for us to have this conversation about Kenyanness? We'll get to the role. But as we're talking about the role to achieve and to ensure we attain Kenyanness, why is it important that we have that? I'll begin with Mark.
I think it's important to have this conversation 50 years down the line, because we never had it 50 years ago. Mm-hmm. Being Kenyan should mean something to us. You know, like when you watch the movies, you feel American movies especially, you hear someone say, I'm American. What does I am Kenyan mean to us? That is what we should be discussing. What does it mean to us? Mm-hmm. Does it mean just being born in Kenya, or does it mean you'll be like your brother's keeper? Because to me, I think I'm Kenyan should mean I'm my brother's keeper. It not necessarily only when we have tragedies like the Westgate Mall, when we said we are one. It should be like throughout. That is what I feel I'm Kenyan or Kenyanness should be meaning.
Should mean. And why is it important that it means that? Why is it important that it means you're your brother's keeper, you know, we are in this together, that you have that pride in being Kenyan? Why?
I think even as we celebrate 50 years, we have visions. I think like the government talks of Vision 2030. For Vision 2030 to succeed, I don't think it is easy for it to be done when Kenyans don't feel passionate about being Kenyan, or feel passionate about their country.
Right.
Unity, I think, will make development come faster. When we are united, when we are looking at the same vision from the same perspective, everything moves faster.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right, Karen, I'll bring it to you. The same question.
World over, you hear nowadays discussions about emerging economies in Africa, like South Africa, Nigeria, Ethiopia, Egypt, and a few other countries, if you look keenly at their nation and the citizenry, they actually embody what it means to be those nationalities. So for us as Kenya, for us to be able to move forward and for us to be able to achieve, like Mark said, Vision 2030, it is so imperative that we feel Kenyan, we embody that Kenyanness in ourselves. And right now we have the new constitution, the current constitution. It is very important for us to espouse the values as enlisted in the constitution and be able to work together, move together as Kenyans, regardless of the challenges that we face. Because if you go to different parts of the country and ask people, do you feel proud to be Kenyan? The answer would most likely be determined by the quality of life they're living. If someone is living in dignity, they're able to afford healthcare, they're able to take their kids to school, they're able to afford a good education, then they will say, yes, I am proud to be Kenyan because Kenya provides an opportunity for me to exploit my potential. But if someone is living on the edge of life, it's difficult for them to say they're Kenyan. They're Kenyan. So just the element of having an ability to exploit your potential, become the best you can be in life as a Kenyan, I think is very important.
Yeah, a country that presents opportunities
Exactly.
to all. But Ngunjiri, the reality is we will not all be okay, successful, comfortable. There will be those of us, we call hustlers, struggling, and it's really part of life. But how why is it still important? I'll go back to that first before we get into the roles. But why is it, even for that person, things are not working out, but why is it important for them to feel Kenyan and to want to rally around that with everybody else?
I want to pick up, I want to start with something that Mark said. We're 50 years old. And the fact that we're actually having this conversation now shows a failure in our system. Because it's taken us 50 years and we still cannot define what it means to be Kenyan. This is a conversation we should have had, and most probably the 50 years we've gone through could have been easier if we'd had this conversation immediately we got independence. When the Union Jack was coming down, when our flag was going up for the first time.
Yes.
When our country is an interesting place because a lot of people who were around in 1963 were not Kenyan before that. See, that's one of the things we never talk about. You were British citizens up to 1963. So anybody born before 1963 their first nationality wasn't Kenyan. They became Kenyan after Kenyan came into being.
Right.
For all of us here, I hope, born after 1963, we were born Kenyan. But we never really defined what that meant. What is the difference between the person who was Kenyan, who became Kenyan the day after 1963, after independence? Was there any difference? And maybe that's why it went wrong. Because for a lot of people, nothing changed. The previous day you were British national, the next day you were Kenyan, your life went on as usual, and we just moved on at that time. And maybe, not maybe, for us, for those of us who are having this conversation, we are saying, look, it might be late, but maybe it's about time we actually just took a step back and decided, defining for ourselves, this is what it means to be Kenyan.
Yeah.
My definition is most probably going to be different from Mark's, it's going to be different from Karen's, maybe different from yours. But once the conversation begins, we can now start coming together to a point in the middle where we say, actually, this is what it means.
Yeah.
Karen has made a very good point. Your quality of life. For some people, a lot of people, a lot of that is going to be defined by quality of life. And that's why Vision 2030 is important. And the challenge I think I'm going to give out there to Mugo Kibati and his team, they need to come back and tell us how Vision 2030 makes us Kenyan, because it brings our quality of life, it balances. Once we achieve Vision 2030, we have a certain basic quality of life that all of us can be proud of. And then you can start saying, you know what, I'm a Kenyan, because in Kenya, you don't go hungry. You, as a Kenyan, that identity must mean something. It must give you, every identity you have or you want to be part of, gives you a certain distinction, a certain pedigree. What is it that Kenyan gives us? I'm not saying it doesn't give us anything, but have you ever sat down and actually listed? As a Kenyan, I have a passport, yes. But how does that mean anything? I have an identity card. How does that? I have, I belong somewhere.
Okay. All right, let's take this further because we're talking about the role, what each of our role is, and let's begin to talk about the different groupings we have. And we'll start with the most basic of them all, and that's the family unit when you're talking about our society. So this is where, you know, you grow up, you're interacting with this mostly small group of people. We have bigger families, but that is where a lot can happen. That is where a lot of this spirit of Kenyanness can be cultivated. That is also where tribalism, you know, can be cooked up and it becomes this very hot pot. I'll begin now with you, Karen. In terms of the family unit, what is that role that is very key and that must be played by that unit?
I'll begin by quoting a scripture in the Bible that says, "They train a child in the way in which they should grow, and once they're grown up, they will never depart from it." That simply means that it is important for parents to take time to nurture values in their children, to bring them up in an admirable way. But in society today, you find most parents are busy going to look for bread and leaving the care of the children and the socialization of the children to the house helps, to the media, TV, radio, internet. And that is not very good. And in most cases, you'd find some of the challenges or most of the challenges being faced by, let's say, young people today. I work a lot with young people in learning institutions like universities and high schools.
Right.
And you meet young people who feel lost. You meet a generation of people who are struggling with an identity. Who am I? And stuff like that, simply because my father or my mother never took time to nurture me, to basically nurture their kids and tell them, you know what, you can make it. You can become whoever you want to become. Or have conversations with kids and let them criticize you, critique them in the same way, have expectations shared, and just help the kids to grow in the right way. I think that is very, very important. And you'd remember that sometime last year there were a number of suicide cases of young people in schools, primary schools and high schools. And most of that was actually just due to parenting. Either a parent is not there, or a parent is there but they don't take time to listen to their children. Because young people and kids want someone they can talk to, they want someone they can confide in. Because sometimes issues of growing up can be very confusing. So you can go to your peers and talk to them, they can advise you, but then if you don't have that parental guidance, it will be such a challenge. So in building a strong nation, parents must invest in their children.
They must invest in their children, they must spend more time, there must be more effort. Mark, isn't that correct?
To a large extent, I agree with what Karen says, because you find that nowadays a child is born. As soon as he or she is of school age, they're rushed off to boarding school from primary school. Then high school, they're in the boarding school. University, the same thing. At what time do they get the time to be taught values by their parents? This is what you're supposed to do. Apart from when we tell them that study this so that I can talk to so-and-so to get you a job. You know, it's more like shortcuts. We are looking for shortcuts and excuses instead of instilling what parents are supposed to instill in their children. Because if I'm not saying taking them to boarding school is bad, but then it's like we are transferring the responsibility to the teachers or to the hostels where they go, so that we don't have to sit down with them and tell them this is the right way.
You know, Mark, I'll challenge you on that one, because some will, even the kids will come home every day, they will spend a lot of time with their children and they will speak to them and hang out, but what they're imparting to these children is negative. So whilst we are saying parents need to make the effort and make time for their children and be more involved, there are those who are being very involved, but negatively so. They are saying, don't hang out with so-and-so, they're not from our tribe. You know, don't hang out with so-and-so, their mother and us, you know. And so from a very young age, this child is already, so how does this poor child who's in this household being told all these things by the parents still have a sense of Kenyanness and detach from these vices?
Actually, that's where I was getting to, because those who are left with their children or who spend some time with their children, either they're too engrossed in their own worries of life, what their job and everything, or they'll be busy giving their kids the wrong advice. Because I think in Kiswahili there's a saying, you can bend a tree when it's still small, when it's still like a seedling.
Yes.
Once it's grown, there's nothing you can change. If you teach your children that this tribe cannot help you, this tribe is inferior, this tribe, all these stereotypes. Once they're grown knowing this tribe is like this, or these other people are like this, there's no way you'll change that kid's mind once they're past teenage. So if you remain with the children, you still have to give them the right information. You instill in them the values of, hard work will pay. Not you can't tell them work hard, but then you show them the shortcuts to getting somewhere. You can't tell them corruption is bad, but then they see you bribing the policeman whenever you're caught in a bad situation on the road. It's about teaching them and also showing them what. You can't teach them one thing and then show them something else and expect them to follow what you say.
Yeah. And you see, when you see this negative parenting Wambongo, it then becomes this vicious cycle, because these kids grow up in this certain way. When they get their kids, it becomes, and you have kids. Take us through some of those important things you tell them as they grow up.
I think we have been a bit harsher on parents than is expected. A lot of that is because I was trying to imagine as you were having this conversation about a family sitting around a table to have a conversation about, with small kids, those people are bad, that tribe is bad. I don't think it happens. I think, and if it does, it's in very, very rare cases.
It happens.
People start learning about bad tribes, as when they're a lot older, not when they're small children.
Really?
You think about very many children.
Let me stop you there, because imagine this is a neighborhood. These are all homesteads.
Yes.
So let's say you're my child, and I tell you, don't go to Karen's house because you know of their child and she's from a different ethnic group. We see a lot of that happen in Kunjiri. So you as a kid, you wonder, why am I being told not to play? But the reason I don't is because I'm this tribe, she's that tribe, and I'm like, I don't want them to mix, those people who voted for so-and-so or who did this. It happens.
But you see, this is where I think, that's why I'm saying we're going wrong, because a lot of the times, if you're living in one estate where kids are playing together, rarely will you have a situation where people have that conversation. What tends to happen is in homogeneous societies where you have a particular region that belongs to a particular community, you have it's very hard to how do you call it? A child is a very innocent person. It's very difficult to tell a child another child is a bad person, and they go to school. Most of the times, these kids go to the same school. They go to the same school, go to the same church. Your parents work at the same place, or the same kind of living, the same kind of living standard. In fact, my experience has been a lot of the people who have ethnic conversations are older, and not even teenage. It's when from your 20s, especially before you get married, as you realize, start advising you who not to get married to. Is when you start thinking, so those people are not, and you start wondering, how come you never told me these things when I was growing up? I know a lot of people who married across tribes who are asking, you can't tell me now I can't marry so-and-so from a particular tribe, and I grew up all my life playing with them.
So you don't think parents are engaging or getting their children?
I think the challenge that Karen gave about absent parents is a lot closer to the situation, because remember, when you're out, you're leaving your children with your help. Now, a lot of the time, the quality of education and exposure your help has is very limited. This is most probably a guy or a chick who has never left the village, who didn't go beyond primary school, if at all.
Yeah.
So that the work as a domestic help is the best job she could get, or he could get. Now, this is a person who has grown up within a very close society, comes in, more often than not, comes from your tribe, comes in and starts bringing up your children, and puts in them her own discriminations, which are by default. She's come from a village somewhere in central or western or coast, and believes she's grown up knowing people from a particular part of the country are bad. Now, you are not there.
But I really choose to disagree, Ngunjiri, because I actually have seen it happen. And usually they'll not sit and tell them this person is from a different community. They will just insist, and you will be thrashed the
Don't play
minute
with
you
those children.
play with Karen. You will come back home with a chapa biboko. So you'll always wonder why, and then maybe later on then it will become. Isn't that the case? Do you
Yeah,
think?
that's really the case.
Yeah.
Where did you guys go up? Anyway, sorry.
I think Gujiri is trying to hide from the reality, because personally I can tell you,
Yeah.
you know, I've grown up in different places, Mombasa, Kisumu, Nairobi. So, you know, in each place you'll find different perspectives about you and your tribe, based on what, mostly it's parents. You know, those small things you say sometimes unconsciously to your kid, like, you know, these people are this way. Those small ones make a very big difference, because a kid will grow up knowing at the back of the mind that these people are this way. So you approach them like with caution.
Okay.
Most of it is parents. Not
So-
that they sit at the table and discuss it,
And
but
discuss and
those small
say,
comments.
yeah.
The
They
small
make-
prejudices.
Yeah,
that
the
you-
small prejudices.
The stereotypes start
The
forming at time.
stereotypes, what they
And
grow
so,
up.
I remember something after the post-election violence. We were doing some work around peace building and
Right.
reconstruction and healing, especially for young people. And I remember meeting a lot of parents who were disturbed because they had to change their children's names to be able to fit in a certain school. Let's say the school is dominated by one particular tribe. The kid's name had to be changed. Some teachers had to be fired. And some parents lost jobs because of the ethnic identity they have. So I think, and I don't think Kenya has like totally healed from what happened.
What happened?
I think, and especially this comes out especially during political seasons. Politicians exploit that very much to just be able to perpetuate themselves in power. So I think it would be imperative for us at various levels to begin to have conversations around positive ethnicity, around just being proud to be who you are. That you could be young, you could be a woman, you could be a man, you could be from this tribe, but then you have a value you're adding to society.
Yeah.
It's like a whole body. If the hand said, I'm too special, or the feet said, I can't do this, then the body can't function.
Yeah. And I want us to move now to religious groups, but as we wind up on the family, what we are saying and what I'm hearing us talking about here is that very deliberate effort to monitor, to check conversations we are having, even the very small ones, around the table, around the house with our kids, because it happens sometimes inadvertently, but that risk is there. Ngunjiri, you see where we're coming from
Yes,
now?
actually, there's one thing I also need to admit.
Yeah.
The Kenya we're living in now is from 2007. We'll always have a pre-2007 Kenya and a post-2007 Kenya, especially on the issue of identity, on the issue of what we're talking about, because a lot of these things, even those open prejudices that have even been put into children, are post-2007.
Right.
That's why I was saying, before 2007, it was very rare to find, especially within the younger generations who are bringing up young kids, people having a conversation about tribe, that you're not from that tribe. There was a lot more inclusivity to some extent, but 2007 seems to have shaken the very core of who we believe we are as a country.
Yeah.
And we all retrogressed back into our ethnic identities. And I don't think there's anything really bad or wrong. I mean, I'm Kikuyu and proud of it. I think the issue is, but is that it? I mean, is that it? Is that what makes me part of this country?
Right.
Because if that's it, then I could be Kikuyu anywhere in the world. And
Yeah.
but I'm here. I'm in this 254, as it's called. And what does that mean? I'm with Karen, who's from Western, you know, and we need to be able to live together, and we'll be able to add value to each other's lives as Kenyans. And that's the Kenya conversation here. How does me in my community, I in her community, Mark in his community, yours, come together and create something that all of us can be comfortable in without anybody feeling like you're pushing them away or cutting them down. That's the conversation about Kenyanness that we are
that we're
trying to
having.
have.
Yeah, that indeed, despite our differences, our diversity, we're in this together. Let's move to religion. We have various religious groups in the country. I remember on Tuesday on the show, I had a discussion with a sheikh and a pastor, and we're talking about the simmering likely conflict and uneasiness between the Christians and the Muslims. They've coexisted very well in Kenya. It's been an okay relationship. But we're looking at the incident the other day in Mombasa, the killings and then the subsequent violence we saw, the burning of the church. And when you look at these two religions and how far they have come, this could be a time bomb. If this issue is not addressed, we've seen it go out of hand in other countries. So in Kenya, the role of churches, of the mosques, of the different religious groups, it's key. You know, it's key going forward. And I'd want to hear your thoughts on this, Karen.
Religion is, I think, one of the key sectors or spheres of influence in any society.
Right.
And I wish to quote Mahatma Gandhi in the 7 Deadly Sins, who said that one of the 7 deadly sins is actually religion without sacrifice. So religion would only become a problem if people do not understand the fundamental truth about what it means to believe in something. We have Muslims, Hindus, we have Christians, we have traditionalists, we have all sorts of religions.
Yes.
We have atheists. It's about a belief in something. And this whole question of strife between, let's say, religious groups in Kenya would only be a strategy by an enemy somewhere to be able to want to take Kenya back to where we are not. That we are trying to climb a certain mountain, get to where we want to get to, of course, which is Vision 2030. But then, and we have a lot of things working for us, natural resources, our human resource, our capacity. And religion, just like tribe has been exploited negatively, let us not allow religion to be exploited to our own disadvantage, because we would go to a place we don't want to get to. See some of the countries like Mali, some of the countries like Nigeria having endless wars about Christians and Muslims. It's really sad. Let's not get there.
What is your take, Mark, in terms especially of the role? Because we're seeing a lot of the youth being radicalized. And you see the challenge comes in when there's the issue of unemployment, there's poverty. And so these terror cells become very appealing. You know, you come and say you're going to give me a few shillings, and then they distort the message. Because as you spoke to the Sheikh, he was very clear. The message Islam preaches is very different from what other people are trying to twist it around to be. But what role then do we see the Muslim leaders coming out to play that's key to make sure that at the end of the day, these young people have an understanding that you have to separate the issues? That's terrorism, you know, that is tearing Kenya apart. That is not bringing Kenya together. And then there is the Christians as well. These two religions and the religious leaders and other religions as well. We've seen a bit of conflict with these two. That's why we'll focus on them. Can still coexist, but also continue preaching that we cannot have that message that is being let to go out of hand.
I think for some time now, I can say there's an identity crisis within religion, more so Christianity. Remember, post 2007 or pre 2007, there was this whole thing about church leaders taking sides and what. So even within Christianity itself, I think they need a lot of soul searching, because the youth always follow what they see their leaders do. In this case, Kenya is a religious society. When the clergy seems divided, even their flock will be divided. And I think it's time they also sat down and decide like where they want their flock to go. Because personally, I don't see anything wrong with someone like a Christian going to a mosque just to know like how Islam operates. I don't see anything wrong with the sheikhs going to a church just to speak to the Christians and tell them we are together. Like the other day, the Muslim clerics came out and condemned the recent attacks and the protests in Mombasa. But then again, I think they always come out a bit late. I think they know those who radicalize the youth in the mosques. They know them. These are part of them. They know whatever happens. You don't wait for the tragedy to strike, then you condemn. Why don't you then point out this person and this person are radicalizing the youth, and it's dangerous for this country?
And I like that you're saying that, because that's what I asked the Sheikh, and you know what he said? That's where the government needs to come in, because I put that to him, because they said, and he admitted they are aware of the people who are doing this radicalization, but they say, but what do they do? So what do you think then should be done?
But who is the government? The government is you and me. If you don't help the so-called government to make you safer, which government are you blaming? I think we also need to get out of this mentality of tunaomba serikali. You cannot omba serikali. The government can't be everywhere all the time. If you know it's Ngunjiri who is inciting the youth or recruiting young boys into terrorism, why don't you tell the police it's this guy? And then it's sorted out before it comes to a Westgate. I think that is the best way. You don't wait for it to happen, then you say we condemn. Condemning doesn't sort anything at the end of the day.
So the question of leadership also comes in that, yeah, I will go and report, but then what response does or do the authorities take? If someone goes to report and nothing happens, why would I want to do that? So I think there's also a responsibility to the people holding offices or people in authority that once you see something, act on it. It's not a matter of just waiting or sitting there, or maybe you have no motivation and you say, no, I won't do this. But then it's about the common good for all of us. So leaders must also be able to act within that mutuality.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And personally, Angelo, I was thinking about this and thinking there's also something even more fundamental in that conversation about religion. Where does your first identity? Where is your first loyalty? I think, I think it applies because religion is the second, the two most powerful centers of influence in the world is politics and religion. And that's why they tend never to get along, because they eat into each other's space. The leaders of each tend to be in conflict a lot. But then in a situation like this, and sometimes it's unfortunate we keep having to use America here, but it just seems to have done some things. I always remember when Obama was running for president, and his church leader, his I don't know that to call him his bishop or his reverend or the pastor of his church, went on a racial, took a racial position. Obama actually blasted him and took a step back and even went to the extent of moving away from that church. You see, the difference there is you must create this, and that's why creating the identity of Kenya is so important, so important to us, because it starts superseding these other identities. And that's how the only way a Muslim is going to wake up and go and say another Muslim is radicalizing the youth is because he's scared that if I don't say that, this guy is going to destroy my country. Until we create that country, that identity in us, then I can't, because you're asking me to betray my brother for what? The reason why a Kikuyu or a Kalenjin or a Luo or a Luya will not stand up against another person of their tribe who is doing something that destroys Kenya is because they haven't, the balances haven't shifted. The tribe is still more important, the religion is still more important to me than the tribe. And now this is a controversial conversation, it's a controversial point to take, but if we are going to build a country that is going to be for all of us, then that country has to be important and anything else for all of us.
So what role then does religion play in building that identity you're talking about?
Actually, the whole conversation about religion and the country, and that's why I'm saying it's going to be very difficult for it to begin from religion, because religion tends to be in conflict with politics. My pastor would want me to say I am Christian before I'm Kenyan. You get what I'm saying? So I can't go and tell him, but what you get, I can't go and challenge his fundamental. You see, fundamentalism is the same. Now what we are suffering from as a country is Muslim fundamentalism. There are some countries in the world that suffer from Christian fundamentalism. The problem about now when somebody is preaching or radicalizing religion, they don't want you to go and tell them. Actually, in fact, they spend a lot of time telling you, your country is a passing fad. This is more important. When these people who are radicalizing the youth are telling them Islam is more important than Kenya, than Somalia, than anywhere else, than Nigeria. So this is what your religion is calling you to do.
And it's even not Islam really, because it does not teach
in
that
fact, you see,
itself.
but this is because they're not being challenged. And this is now where my really personal cry goes to the Muslim clerics, to the Muslim leadership, and telling them, I can't, as a Christian, I can't speak into that situation. Somebody from the Muslim faith must speak into that situation and challenge these people who are radicalizing the youth and distorting Islam to the youth. But then as that is happening, we must continue in our very small ways, from everywhere, in our various roles and responsibilities, to keep investing in this thing that we call Kenya, because only when it becomes strong enough for somebody to say, no, do I really want to lose this thing for that?
All right.
Does it become
Okay.
a conversation?
Our time is running out, but you've talked about something very important, politics. And I want us to get into that. You hear a lot, serikali nataka ifanye. So there's a place of government, there's a place of opposition, and all leaders, when we're talking about our politics. And in Kenya, it really does, I guess also around the world, does take center stage. So we're talking about our leadership, especially now in Kenya, the minority and the government. What then must they play? Because we hear a lot of the times actually the media getting blamed for some of the things they say, and then we put them on air and they say, but now the media should not put these things, but why are you saying them? And say, oh, we're just playing politics. So in terms of just that discipline, to know that if I say something, Mama Mboga somewhere will take that seriously, and that will be what will guide or determine perhaps their action going forward. Mark?
I think when it comes to politics, we have this tendency to blame politicians more than ourselves. And I think this still holds, that your leadership reflects who you are. Before you point fingers at your leaders for dividing the country, ask yourself, who are they representing? Whose wishes are they representing? If they're not representing your wishes, then why do you follow what they say? Because if a leader comes to a platform and then tells you, attack so and so, or so and so is this way, he's one, you're like 1,000 or hundreds. Why can't you then tell him, no, we can't take this message? The day you'll stop a politician from giving you the negative message is the day you'll start to see a difference. You can't entertain them and clap whenever they say they divide the country, and then you start blaming them. It's the politicians, it's you. The problem is us.
Karen, but we still see that happening. We still see they go out there, they say those things, we clap and we follow them. What is wrong? Why do we continue to follow what we already know is wrong, but just because it's being said by our leaders?
Walking the talk, I think, is going to be so key here when it comes to both leaders, people in positions of authority, and us as a citizenry. For instance, the former American President John F. Kennedy said that ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country. I wish to take it further and say, ask what you can do for your country to serve you better. And like he said, a lot of times we complain about politicians and the politics, but what if they actually don't know any better? Because of the system we have had to grow up in, the system the politicians have had to be nurtured through. What if that is the only thing they know? Although that cannot be the case, because we see other better examples elsewhere in community, grassroots organizations, women's organizations, youth organizations. So you see that good leadership is actually possible. So what if, as a country, we took that question of leadership so seriously to the point that we start creating institutions that nurture good leadership, that nurture positive politicians, transformative leaders? Because if I am a leader or I'm a person in a position of authority, maybe I just went there because of tribe or clan or something else, what will give me the positive agenda to be able to push for Kenyans? I think responsibility starts with us. That we have to take that responsibility to nurture ourselves. Even sometimes people find themselves in leadership, they've been thrust into leadership or into greatness, and they don't know what to do. Start learning from what you do. We make mistakes, but learn from them. And as a country also, there's this challenge of just being reactive. I think that is very bad. It's more like waiting for things to happen, and then all of a sudden we go like, okay, so what can we do in this situation? Then we start putting measures in place. I think a good leader, and you know, like they say, leadership, actually everything rises and falls on leadership. Leadership is like everything. Leadership and politics generally permeates our everyday life. It permeates how we live in our houses. It permeates our family lives. It permeates how far we can go in life, how far we can reach our goals. So we must be able to educate ourselves politically and think politically and begin to engage. Like it would be very interesting to see young people having discussions, let's say on social media, and engaging, asking questions about political parties. How do they function? How are they formed? Who are the members? How do I become a member? How do I begin to add value? When it comes to voting or running for office, how do I then add value to that, either voting or running for office?
All right.
It is very important to have this conversation.
Gunjiri, I want you to make your comments as we also wind up the show. Our time is up. But for each of you, as you also touch on the issue of leadership, we have challenges as a country. We are diverse in religion, in tribe, you name it. Even in our own lives, we have our own personal challenges. So we don't have a perfect life. Nobody has a perfect life. There is no perfect country. We don't have a perfect Kenya. It will always have these ups and downs. So irrespective of all that and looking at all that, I want you, as you make your closing remarks, to speak to whoever is watching us right now, to appeal to them or to show how important it is that despite all that, that granted, the things will not always be smooth. But the role is upon each and every one of us to ensure that Kenya comes first and we cultivate that Kenyanness right from childhood and in every place we are, that we each have a role to play.
You know, why for me it is so important for us to define and understand and live the Kenyan identities, because everything we do, a lot of the times, as we were speaking about politics, the kind of leadership we elect is meant to, we elect people to go and fight for us against others. See, we every time when you're putting people in authority, it's either for them to do something for or against. So when you don't know, when you have nothing in common, then we are doing, so we as a tribe or as a religion elect representatives to go and fight for the interests of our community or of our religion or of our age group or of our agenda. So you hear women leaders are supposed to take and empower the woman. And you're wondering, take and empower the women against what? Or youth leaders, as I've told, you must now step up and take over. So it's a very conflict-driven leadership system. Why? Because we don't have something over here that we all walk in and we're saying, we are electing you to go and make this better.
Right.
See, if we had this thing over here, if we all agreed, this is what it means to be Kenyan. And then from the tribes, from the religions, from the age groups, from the genders, we all sent the best people we knew to go and make that thing better. We would actually find our leadership turn around completely.
Okay.
But because we've never understood, so I send you as my representative, as a man, go and make sure the women don't take over any more positions. And the women go to make sure the men are not taking any. So our decision-making process of choosing people is broken down right at the bottom, because we're choosing them without the big picture in mind. So Kenyanness is about getting the big picture. And first we must agree what is a big picture.
Yeah.
As a country, what is a big picture for us?
Okay.
Now, once we agree on the big picture, then we now start fitting in the small pieces and say, this is what we can do as a religion. This is what I can do as a business person.
Okay.
This is what I can do as media. The reason media gets bashed all the time is because when you're doing the right, when you're giving us all the news, we get to the point where like, we don't want to know all those things.
Yeah, you don't want to know the bad that's
But then
in
when you stop giving us all the news, we're like, now you're censoring.
Yeah.
Why? We don't have the big picture. When once we have the big picture, let me finish by using an example of football. A football team has a very clear idea of why they come together and what they're going to do. So when you go looking for football players, when you go looking for the coach, for manager, you know why you're looking for them. So you find that there's a certain systematic progression. I need this kind of football player, I need this kind of manager, Now, if we don't have that big picture in how we're running our country, you just throw the guy you saw playing football outside. That guy looks like he can play football, throw him in. That's the problem we have as a country. We must get the big picture, and that's why it's very, very important for us to define what being Kenyan is.
All right, thank you, Ngunjiri. Very quickly, Mark, in less than a minute, your closing remarks on us playing our role.
I think, to make it brief, I can say, just in brief, let every Kenyan play their role in making Kenya better. Let's get out of this. I think we got out of the KANU days, but the KANU mentality still remains, where we look at the center. These are not the days when you have to look, let's say, at the president to make things better at your village. Play your role in making Kenya better. Don't complain Kenya is divided, yet you are one of those people who is participating in dividing Kenya.
Yeah.
Play your individual role, no matter how small it is. It is what makes Kenya Kenya.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. Finally, Karen.
The other time after Westgate, the president in his speech said something that I picked out. One line said that deep inside our hearts as Kenyans, where it matters most, we are one. So that simply means that there are moments that come when it doesn't matter, it doesn't count when we are divided. Surely, let's not work against ourselves. Let's define that Kenyan dream and pursue happiness as we live our lives, because life is indeed very short. Let's pursue happiness, be happy, live quality lives, and just care for each other.
Okay. Well put. Thank you all very much. Mark Otani, Radio News Editor, RMS, Karen Wakoli, Youth Leadership Consultant, and of course, Ngunjiri Wambogo, Convener of Kenya and columnist. Thank you all for joining us this morning. Great discussion. I wish we had more time. It is one of those you could go on and on and on because it really is about our country. So it's a big discussion. We hope our viewers